On a quiet summer morning, a semi pro football player got into a car with someone that he trusted for a night out for some fun. Odin Lloyd was a son, a teammate, and a man that was still chasing his dreams, completely unaware that this late night ride would end in murder. The person behind the wheel was not a stranger to him either. He was Aaron Hernandez, an NFL star with a multi-million-dollar contract and a private life that was unraveling in paranoia and violence. Within minutes, gunshots shattered the dark, leaving behind bullet casings, blood soaked gravel, and questions that nobody wanted to ask. How does fame and success turn into cold blooded murder? And how does loyalty turn into a death sentence? This story follows the path from trust to execution, and it forced the world to confront the cost of violence, secrecy, contact sports, and CTE. Welcome to the True Crime Nurse, everybody. My name is Kat, and I'm a registered nurse who loves all things nursing and true crime. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring the bell before you go. You all know that I try very, very hard to focus as much as possible on the victim in every case. And in today's video, I do need to share a little bit about Aaron Hernandez's background and CTE. So unfortunately, he is going to get a little bit more time in today's video than I would typically like, but I promise it's for a good reason. So sit back, relax, and let's get started. Odin Lloyd was born on November 14th, 1985 in the U.S. Virgin Islands to his mother, Ursula Ward, and father, John Lloyd. From a very young age, Lloyd's sanctuary was the football field. In the streets and sandlots of Dorchester, he could always be found tossing around a ball or playing pickup games with his friends instead of causing trouble. At John D. O'Brien High School, his coaches said that his talent was off the charts and that he was truly a great kid. Coach Branch became a mentor and like a big brother figure to Odin, and he knew that football could be his ticket out of the city and into college. But Lloyd had distractions just like any other teenager does. Odin's focus was beginning to wander as he was chasing girls and enjoying his social life, but unfortunately, this caused his grades to slip. The drop was severe enough that he lost all eligibility to play football. After high school, Odin went to Delaware State University in 2005 because he was hoping to play football there. He even packed his bags, moved to campus and everything, but his plans fell through. His financial aid wasn't approved and he ran out of money. Odin made the difficult decision to leave Delaware State and return back to Boston because he had no way to pay for college now and he felt that his family needed him more back at home. He refused to let go of football, though. He took little odd jobs to get by at places like NStar Power Company, and he also did some landscaping work on the weekends. Every weekday and sometimes on weekends, he worked really hard, and every weekend, he would also try to pursue his passion of football. This young man was extremely determined. In 2007, Odin joined his local semi-pro football team, and it was called the Boston Bandits. It wasn't the NFL, but being on this team allowed him to keep playing the game that he loved while he was still living at home. Money was very tight for Lloyd at this time, though. The Bandits required a $75 annual fee for each player to cover the basics like referees and equipment, but even that was almost out of Odin's budget. He couldn't afford his own jersey, so his teammates would lend him spares. He'd run onto the field wearing a uniform with someone else's name on the back, even if the stitching didn't match who he was. Lloyd was just grateful to be there and to be playing. Teammates remember him biking to practice because he had no car, finding any way to stay involved in football that he could. Despite financial struggles, he was a core member of the Bandits from 2007 on. By 2013, Odin was in his prime in this semi-pro league. He had been training so hard that winter that he ended up becoming the MVP and led the Bandits to a championship. While balancing work and football, Odin Lloyd also found love. His job at the power company occasionally took him to places like Connecticut, and this is where he met a young woman named Shania Jenkins. Shania was gentle and supportive, and the two of them very quickly became inseparable. Lloyd fell deeply in love, even if it meant sometimes missing Bandits practices to spend time with her. Shania's older sister, named Cheyenne Jenkins, was the fiancée of the rising NFL star Aaron Hernandez and the tight end for the New England Patriots. By the way, I had no idea that the Patriots are going to the Super Bowl tomorrow, so the timing of this video is just a crazy coincidence that my husband actually pointed out to me. Odin Lloyd was introduced to Aaron through Shania, so this is when their paths unfortunately crossed. Odin met Aaron in the summer of 2012 because Aaron Hernandez had actually reserved a private skybox at the Gillette Stadium to throw a birthday party for Shania Jenkins, and Odin came as Shania's date. For Odin being a diehard football fan who still dreamt of someday playing in the NFL, this was surreal. He was in awe of this luxury suite, and he could not believe that he was hanging out with a Patriots player. The two of them hit it off pretty well, too. In many ways, they were opposites because Aaron was this multimillionaire athlete living in a mansion, while Odin was struggling to afford his semi pro football fees. They shared a mutual love for football, though, and soon they actually became friends enough to where that they would go out at Hernandez's North Attleboro home and out clubbing too. Odin never bragged to his bandit teammates that he was hanging out with this NFL player, and in fact, when he first met Aaron, Odin didn't even mention that he played football himself because he didn't want to seem like a groupie. If his teammates asked about Hernandez, though, Odin would just say, "Oh, he's a cool guy," and leave it at that. Lloyd's friend said that he kept his worlds mostly separate. Friends of Odin's that did end up meeting Aaron Hernandez, though, said that he seemed like a really nice guy. As their friendship grew, Hernandez would visit Dorchester to go pick up Lloyd or just to say hi, and at one point, he even lent Odin a black Chevy Suburban that he'd rented for a weekend in June of 2013. Aaron told Odin that he could keep the SUV until that Monday. This was an incredibly kind gesture that had Odin grinning from ear to ear because normally Odin rode his bike to get around everywhere. Odin confided to his close friend Daryl Hodge that being around Hernandez gave him a taste of this NFL lifestyle, and it was very inspiring to him. Clubbing in VIP sections, expensive drinks, talking about going on vacations to places like California, it was all fun, but Lloyd never lost himself in it, and he seemed really happy with what little he had. But before we get into the events that led up to the murder, I do want to briefly touch on Aaron Hernandez's background just because it does provide some context today. Aaron Hernandez grew up in Connecticut in a small sports-focused town where his father Dennis was a well-known local football legend. Aaron showed elite athletic talent ever since he was a little kid, and he ended up becoming a high school star that was destined for greatness. That shifted dramatically in 2006 when his father died unexpectedly during a routine surgery, though. Friends and family said that this loss was a major turning point and that Hernandez was never the same after that. Aaron had become withdrawn, rushed his graduation, and abandoned his plans to attend UConn that year. He decided to leave home and play at the University of Florida instead. In Florida, Hernandez thrived on the field, and he became a key part of championship-winning teams. Off the field, though, troubling behavior had started. He assaulted a bouncer while underage at a club. He was questioned in a shooting, repeatedly failed drug tests, and he developed a reputation for breaking all the rules. Even though he was never convicted of any major crimes while in school in Florida, concerns about his behavior followed him into the NFL. Aaron was drafted by the New England Patriots despite this behavior, and Hernandez quickly became an on-field star. His career peaked in 2012 when he signed a 5-year, $40 million contract. He was in a loving relationship, had started a family, and had everything that he could have ever dreamt of, right? Wrong. Hernandez's life behind the scenes was completely unraveling. In July of 2012, he was accused of murdering 2 men in a Boston nightclub over a spilled drink. Those murders went unsolved for over a year, which allowed Hernandez to continue playing, but he was growing increasingly paranoid that the police or people close to him would expose him or turn on him. This fear led him to shooting a friend named Alexander Bradley in the face, and that injury left him permanently injured. So, by 2013, Hernandez was living in a constant state of suspicion and fear. He always had weapons on him, and he said that no one could be trusted. Even with all that wealth, fame, and family, his life had become defined by violence and paranoia. This pattern of behavior and mistrust definitely played a role in today's case because Odin Lloyd was a friend that Hernandez came to view as a potential threat. That is when everything changed. On Friday night, June 14th, 2013, Odin Lloyd and Aaron Hernandez went out to a Boston nightclub called Rumor with some of their friends. Hernandez apparently saw Lloyd talking to a group of men that Aaron recognized. These were men that Hernandez had previously had some kind of altercation or bad blood with. In Aaron's eyes, Odin becoming friendly with those men felt like betrayal. Remember, Hernandez had been growing more and more paranoid in general, so this made him believe that his future brother-in-law's partner was now someone that he couldn't trust. Hernandez became enraged. Witnesses at the club that night said that he glared at Lloyd and those men, and everything became tense. By the time the club closed on early June 15th, Hernandez was stewing over what he saw as Odin's disloyalty. The 2 men left Rumor separately because of this. Investigators believe that by the very next day, Hernandez was convinced that Odin knew something about those 2012 murders or some other secret. In the span of just a day or two, Aaron decided that his friend and basically family member had to be eliminated. On June 16, 2013, Aaron reached out to two friends from Connecticut named Carlos Ortiz and Ernest Wallace. These were buddies from his hometown of Bristol, and they were guys that he trusted to have his back no matter what. Hernandez told them to get to Massachusetts as soon as possible, and he texted the guys, quote, "You can't trust anyone anymore," end quote. Ortiz and Wallace arrived at Hernandez's mansion on 22 Ronald C. Meyer Drive in North Attleboro later that night. Surveillance cameras in Aaron's neighborhood recorded their bluish-silver Nissan Altima pulling up at about 1 o'clock in the morning on June 17th. Hernandez's own security system also captured the two friends arriving and entering into the house. Aaron was seen on camera handling a gun inside his home before they left, and at one point, he walked through the living room with it in his hand while he was going off about mistrust. His fiancée, Cheyenne, was home but asleep upstairs, so she didn't see or hear anything that was unfolding. Once they were in the car, Hernandez called Odin Lloyd to arrange a meetup. Even though things had been awkward from the club incident, Odin apparently agreed to get together. It wasn't unusual for Aaron to invite Odin out, so this is the bait that he needed. At 2:30 in the morning on June 17th, the Altima showed up outside the Lloyd family home on Fayston Street in Dorchester. Odin Lloyd was at home that night because earlier in the evening he'd been at a barbecue with his friends watching basketball. Odin had originally planned to spend that Sunday night at home watching sports with his friend Daryl Hodge, but Hodge said that the plans changed as soon as Odin got a text message around 9 p.m. from the NFL, which is what they called Aaron Hernandez. Odin told his friend that he might go out after all and left the barbecue with a plate of leftover food, then dropped off Hodge shortly before midnight. Odin's sister Olivia was awake and actually saw her brother head out that night. From her window, she watched Odin getting into that silver blue Nissan with Aaron Hernandez at the wheel and two other men inside. It was unusual that Odin didn't say goodbye or mention where he was going that night, though. His sister felt that maybe he was in a rush or felt some tension, but she wasn't alarmed at the time. She for sure recognized the celebrity in the driver's seat, though, and figured that her brother was just going out with his NFL friend. As the car sped southbound out of the city, heading back towards Aaron's turf, Odin Lloyd grew increasingly quiet. Odin may have sensed that something was off as he sat in the car with Hernandez and two strangers from Connecticut, because at 3:07 that morning, he did something that is heart-wrenching. Odin pulled out his phone and sent a few texts to his sister Olivia. The first said, "Did you see who I'm with?" Olivia was asleep, so she didn't respond quickly. A minute later, Odin said, "Hello," and then he answered his own question. He wrote NFL, letting her know that he was with the famous future brother-in-law. Finally, at 3:23 that morning, Odin sent one final chilling message that said, "Just so you know." No further explanation, just that last cryptic text. At the moment, Olivia thought that he was bragging, but looking back, he needed her to know that he was in danger in case he didn't come back. Let me know if you're reading it that way too. Hernandez drove to a secluded area in North Attleboro. This was at an industrial park that was less than a mile from his house, and he said that it was to find a quiet place to just smoke and hang out. As the four men got out of the car, Aaron Hernandez was carrying a large caliber .45 handgun. Realizing that he was in grave danger, Odin tried to protect himself. He raised his arm as the first gunshot rang out. Then he turned and tried to run for his life, but Hernandez didn't stop. As Odin was turning away, the gunman fired two more shots into his back, and we're going to get more into his injuries in the autopsy portion of today's video. But now that he was critically wounded and lying face up on the gravel but still moving, Hernandez then stood over him and fired two more shots. In their rush to get away, the killers didn't attempt to collect any of the spent shell casings, and they didn't take Odin's phone either. It was still in his pocket, which had those texts that he had sent just minutes earlier. Hernandez, Wallace, and Ortiz fled the scene almost immediately. They quickly got back into the Nissan Altima and sped away, leaving Odin Lloyd dying and alone near the industrial dumpsters and gravel mounds. It was done. Odin Lloyd, at only 27 years old, was shot to death by someone that he trusted enough to ride with in the middle of the night. The Altima raced back towards Aaron Hernandez's house, which was only about a mile away and a 2-minute drive. Surveillance cameras in the neighborhood captured the vehicle leaving the industrial park at about 3:27 that morning and arriving back at Aaron's mansion by 3:30. The car was seen on camera entering the cul-de-sac without Odin Lloyd in it. His own home security footage also showed Hernandez, Ortiz, and Wallace were turning inside the home without Odin as well, and Hernandez was still carrying his gun. Cheyenne Jenkins came downstairs at some point because of all the commotion, but Aaron told his fiance that everything was fine and go back upstairs. She had no idea that the man her sister loved was lying dead not far from their home. Wallace and Ortiz then left in the Altima to head back to Connecticut, and they dumped the guns somewhere along that route. Aaron Hernandez stayed at home but was frantically trying to clean up any evidence. He took apart his home surveillance system, ripping out or destroying parts of it sometime on June 17th before police had an opportunity to seize it. He also handed his personal cell phone over to his attorneys that day in pieces as if he had smashed it, but he said that it fell. Hernandez also contacted a professional house cleaning service and had them come scrub his entire house on June 17th, just a couple of hours after the murder. He was probably hoping that they would eliminate any gunshot residue, blood, or any other forensic traces that they may have tracked into his house. Meanwhile, back at the industrial park on that very same day, a teenage jogger was out for his run and stumbled upon something horrifying. At about 5:30 that evening, the body of a black male, clearly dead, was lying in an open area near some dumpsters. He called the police immediately. Responding officers from North Attleboro and the state got there quickly, but the victim had no pulse. They found a wallet and ID confirming that the deceased man was Odin Lloyd from Boston. When the detectives found and scrolled through Odin's phone, though, they saw the startling text that he had sent to his sister referencing this NFL person. This was the first major clue pointing to who could be involved. Also in Odin's pockets were the keys to a car, and these just so happened to belong to the Nissan Altima that had been rented in Aaron Hernandez's name. So, right away, evidence seemed to be clearly pointing to Aaron Hernandez. By Monday evening on June 17th, news had already broken that a body had been found in North Attleboro that was identified as Odin Lloyd, and that a prominent NFL player was being questioned in connection to it. The Patriots organization and fans were stunned as Aaron Hernandez's name surfaced in the news as a possible suspect in this homicide investigation. There was no turning back now. Within hours of this murder, the police were focusing on Hernandez, but in those first couple of days, he carried on as if everything was normal. On June 18th, reporters swarmed outside of his mansion, and cameras actually caught him driving in and out of his driveway, at one point even smiling and smirking to the cameras. He hadn't been arrested just yet, so he was probably clinging to this delusional belief that without a weapon or eyewitnesses that would snitch on him, police couldn't pin it on him. But investigators were rapidly putting the pieces of this puzzle together. Detectives from the Massachusetts State Police, Bristol County, and North Attleboro PD all worked together. They knew that they had a high-profile situation on their hands, so they gathered every shred of evidence that they could. A summer storm rolled in that day, drenching the area with heavy rain, so investigators had to hustle to preserve tire tracks and footprints in the mud near Lloyd's body before the rain had an opportunity to wash them away. One of these footprints came from a size 13 Nike Air Jordan shoe. When police searched Hernandez's home, they found that he owned multiple pairs of size 13 Nikes, any of which could have made that impression. But before we continue on with the crime scene evidence, I want to talk about the most important evidence in all cases, in my biased opinion, and that is the autopsy. Dr. William Zane was the Massachusetts medical examiner that performed the autopsy on Odin Lloyd. As a seasoned forensic pathologist, Dr. Zane had seen many shooting victims, but Odin's injuries were particularly severe. Odin had 6 distinct gunshot wounds. Dr. Zane pointed them out on a mannequin for jurors during the trial, and there were wounds to Odin's chest, right side or flank, upper back, right forearm, and left collarbone area. These were not 6 random hits. A bullet entered the outside of Odin's right forearm and that passed through it and continued into his body. This was when Odin was raising his arm to protect himself. The bullet shattered part of the bone and muscle there, and after it went through his right side, it ended up in his right flank area. As Odin turned away, he was shot twice in the back, and Dr. Zane described 2 separate but close entry points near his shoulder blade. We also know that Odin's lungs were hit because the ME said that there were injuries to the lungs that also contributed to his death. A bullet through the back could have punctured a lung, causing it to collapse and bleed internally, and this would have left Odin gasping for air and potentially coughing up blood. Finally, Odin was shot twice in the chest, once on the left and once on the right. These were those execution-style shots that Aaron Hernandez did while he was standing over Odin as he was struggling to catch his breath. Both shots were fatal individually. The left side shot penetrated the chest wall and tore through the heart, specifically the right ventricle. In court, Dr. Zane testified that one bullet perforated the pericardium, which is the sac that's around the heart, and this caused rapid internal bleeding into the sac and added pressure onto the heart, which leads to a fatal rhythm and eventually the heart stopping. A wound like this to the heart would cause death in a matter of seconds to minutes. The right-sided chest shot went through his right upper lung lobe, which made it impossible to breathe on top of all the other injuries that he already had. So Odin died of injuries to the heart, lungs, liver, kidneys, and gunshots to the torso. That is exactly what the coroner wrote. Even with the trauma team there on scene when this all happened, Odin's injuries were not survivable. Dr. Zane's conclusion on the death certificate was, of course, homicide due to multiple gunshot wounds. He said that any of the 3 shots, actually, not just the 2, would have been fatal on their own. This whole case is disturbing and sad, but this next detail really made me emotional when I read it. Odin's left fist was found clenched over his chest wounds when his body was discovered. This means that he had a moment to bring his hand up to his bleeding heart, and this is a response to pain. He literally gripped his chest as he was passing away. Dr. Zane said that Odin may have lost consciousness before he died, and I hope that he didn't suffer despite him fighting for his life. But the question of conscious pain was brought up at trial because prosecutors wanted to prove extreme cruelty against Hernandez. Massachusetts law says that a victim consciously suffering is required for it to be considered extreme. It's so interesting to me to see how the laws can vary so much from state to state, even within the same country. Now to go back to the crime scene investigation, technicians recovered 5 spent shell casings from the ground near Odin's body, and these were all .45 caliber casings, each marked with a signature pattern from the same gun. As detectives dug into Aaron Hernandez's movements that day, they discovered that he had rented a Nissan Altima from an Enterprise rent-a-car office for that specific weekend. When they contacted that rental agency, they found from an Enterprise manager that when Aaron had returned the Altima on June 17th, she noticed 2 strange things. First, there was a small piece of chewed up blue bubble gum stuck underneath the driver's seat, and next to it, there was an empty .45 caliber casing. The employee even remembered Hernandez offering her a piece of blue cotton candy flavored gum when he had dropped off the car, and this was an unusual detail, but one that had a lot of significance now. The employee had tossed the gum and casing into a trash can at the rental lot, though, because she didn't realize their significance. But once the investigators heard this, they combed through that dumpster and successfully recovered the shell casing and wad of gum. Lab tests confirmed that it was the same brand and flavor that Hernandez was known to chew. The casing was also the same make and caliber as those found on the murder scene. A blunt was also found near Odin's body, and that contained DNA from at least 2 people. One profile matched Odin, and the other DNA profile matched Aaron Hernandez, with a likelihood of 1 in quadrillion of it being anybody but him. As for the shell casings from the rental car trash, the lab found a DNA profile that also matched Hernandez on it. The presence of his DNA on evidence both at the murder site and connected to the murder weapon was highly incriminating. On June 18th, police executed a search warrant on Hernandez's home. This search also led to more incriminating evidence. This is when they found the destroyed surveillance system and his cell phone in pieces, which his attorney handed over to them, claiming that it had been damaged. They also noticed that a team of professional cleaners had just been through the house, which obviously seemed suspicious. But police did seize the surviving video footage that was from the security system. This was crucial because they found all the videos that we've been talking about. Him coming and going at critical points, him with a gun, coming back without Odin, and more. There was even surveillance from the industrial park area where one camera caught the silhouette of a vehicle similar to the Altima entering the area at 3:23 that morning, and audio picked up possible gunshots too. The visuals that they obtained alone showed Hernandez picking up Odin, driving to the murder site, and returning home shortly after the murder with a gun in his hand. What more could you need for an open and shut case at this point? Now remember, Aaron could easily afford the best attorneys out there, so the detectives needed to leave no stone unturned. They used cell phone records and GPS data to find out that cell tower pings traced the path of Hernandez's phone and Odin's phone from Dorchester to North Attleboro that morning, proving that they traveled together. The disturbing text that Aaron sent planning everything, plus the chilling text that Odin sent to his sister, painted a clear picture of exactly what happened. Within a day or two, authorities tracked down Carlos Ortiz and Ernest Wallace because of the messages that Aaron had sent as well. Ortiz was arrested in Connecticut on June 27th, and Wallace turned himself in Florida on June 28th. Both were charged initially as accessories to murder. Ortiz gave a statement to police implicating Hernandez, though. According to Ortiz, during the ride that night, Hernandez mentioned being upset that Lloyd had spoken to certain people at the club that night. Ortiz also said that at the scene, he heard gunshots after Hernandez and Lloyd stepped out of the car and that he saw Hernandez with a gun when he jumped back in afterwards. Wallace mostly kept quiet, though. Finally, on June 26, 2013, police decided that they had probable cause to make an arrest. That morning, on live TV news, they captured Aaron Hernandez as he was walking out of his house in handcuffs with his hands tucked into a white t-shirt. He was finally under arrest for the murder of Odin Lloyd, and only 90 minutes later, the New England Patriots released Aaron Hernandez from the team. At his arraignment that afternoon, prosecutors described how Hernandez had orchestrated the execution of Odin Lloyd, outlining all of the evidence that we just talked about. The judge denied him any bail, and the Patriots organization, the NFL, and fans watched in disbelief as one of their youngest stars was now facing life in prison. Aaron Hernandez's murder trial began in January 2015 in Massachusetts, about 18 months after the crime, which, compared to other cases that we've covered, is pretty quick. This case drew massive attention, and over the next few months, the prosecutors presented an extensive case calling 131 witnesses. I have never heard of a case having that many before, but let me know down below if you have. The defense admitted that Hernandez was present at the scene, but they argued that he did not pull the trigger, suggesting that one of the co-defendants acted on their own. Under Massachusetts law, though, that distinction didn't really matter because either way, Hernandez participated in this crime. Then the prosecutors went over the surveillance videos, phone data, forensic evidence, and witness testimony. Jurors saw the videos of Hernandez at key locations before and after the murder, including the ones showing him holding what appeared to be a gun shortly after. Cell phone records showed Hernandez and Lloyd traveling together to the park where Lloyd was killed, but only Hernandez leaving. Remember, Odin's phone stayed there in his pocket, and text messages that Hernandez sent showed planning, paranoia, and consciousness of guilt. Hernandez's fiancée, Cheyenne Jenkins, testified under immunity that she disposed of a heavy box at Hernandez's request, but claimed that she didn't know what exactly was inside, and she also delivered money to one of the co-defendants. These were actions the prosecutors argued were attempts to destroy evidence and assist the accomplices in this case. Although the murder weapon was never recovered, ballistics evidence showed that the bullets came from a .45 caliber Glock, and this was the gun that Hernandez was known to own. The medical examiner's testimony was especially impactful, though, and we did already touch on most of it, but it was extremely difficult for Ursula, Odin's mother, to hear all of these details in court. Lloyd was shot 6 times, with multiple wounds independently fatal, and this supported the prosecution's argument that the killing was deliberate and extremely violent. The graphic nature of the autopsy evidence emphasized how cruel this murder truly was. Hernandez didn't testify, and the defense relied mostly on cross-examining all of the prosecutor's witnesses, and they argued that the entire case was circumstantial. They also said that no evidence had proved that Hernandez even fired the gun. The prosecution countered that Hernandez had motive, control over the situation, and actively covered up the crime afterward, which is all behavior inconsistent with him being an innocent bystander. After 7 days of deliberation, though, the jury unanimously found Aaron Hernandez guilty of first-degree murder based on extreme atrocity or cruelty, along with multiple firearms charges. He was automatically sentenced to life in prison without parole at the age of 25 years old. The courtroom reaction was emotional, especially from Lloyd's family, and his mother publicly forgave Hernandez during the victim impact statements. But Odin Lloyd and his family wouldn't get the full justice that they deserved in seeing this life sentence play out. On the morning of April 19, 2017, inside his single cell at Sousa Baranowski Correctional Center, Aaron Hernandez hung himself with a bedsheet. He had jammed the door from the inside with cardboard so that no one could come in and save him, but Hernandez was still rushed to a hospital nearby and was pronounced dead shortly after. The news about his death was everywhere. At only 27 years old, which is the same age that Odin Lloyd was when he was murdered, the former NFL star turned convicted murderer had taken his own life. The timing was eerie, though, because this was almost exactly 2 years after his conviction for Odin's murder, and just days after his acquittal in the double murder case for the men that were shot outside of that nightclub. That was the incident that I mentioned earlier in the video, in case you forgot. Many people wondered, though, why now? Hernandez had just scored a huge legal win, and his lawyers were still optimistic about appealing the Lloyd case too. Some people thought that Hernandez might have been depressed and hiding it, or that maybe the high of the acquittal, followed by returning to a lonely cell, made the whole fight seem worthless because he was still in prison. This is where a major loophole comes in. At the time of Aaron's death, Massachusetts law said that if a defendant dies while their conviction is under direct appeal, the conviction is vacated as if it never happened. Hernandez's appeal of the Lloyd murder verdict was still pending, so after his death, a Massachusetts judge did vacate his 2015 conviction under that rule, which made Aaron Hernandez technically innocent in the eyes of the law. This enraged Odin's family and the public. In 2019, the Massachusetts Supreme Judicial Court abolished that doctrine, though, so this reinstated Hernandez's conviction 2 years later. It sounds far-fetched that someone would do all of this for money for other people, but there were rumors that Hernandez mentioned him doing this in one of 3 notes that he left in his cell. One note was to Cheyenne, his fiancée, one to Avielle, his daughter, and one to a close friend in prison. An unconfirmed leak to the media said that he wrote "You're rich" in Cheyenne's note, implying that the money from the NFL pension would be coming her way because of that loophole from him dying and vacating the sentence. This was never officially confirmed, though, and the conviction was reinstated anyway. What is certain, though, is that his death was self-inflicted and there were no signs of foul play. Correctional officers reported that Hernandez even soaped the floor of his cell to make it harder if he changed his mind, and he drew religious marks all over the walls in blood, including references to a Bible verse, John 3:16, "For God so loved the world," and he also had John 3:16 written in ink on his forehead. A Bible was also left open in his cell to that verse. I wish we had an understanding of why he did this, because after reading it, I don't see the connection to him whatsoever. Just the day before this happened, Hernandez had spoken with Cheyenne and his daughter over the phone, and he seemed to be really happy, even saying, "Daddy's going to be home soon." He showed no signs that this was his final goodbye. He had just been moved off of watch after the acquittal because he seemed to be doing great, so he either planned it quickly and kept a facade up, or something triggered him that night. Some wondered if revelations about his personal life was weighing on him, because around that time, stories had come out that Hernandez may have been having a romantic relationship with a male friend when he was in high school, and it also came out that he had an alleged lover in prison too. If true, being in prison and unable to defend himself publicly could have made him feel trapped, not just physically, but also emotionally, with secrets and shame. Odin Lloyd's family expressed their compassion despite all of their pain, and Odin's mother said that she would not celebrate his death and was praying for Aaron's soul. The Patriots were on a visit to the White House for a Super Bowl victory that year, so news of the ex-player's death coinciding with that made headlines too. I still think it's crazy that this video happened to line up with them being in the Super Bowl again tomorrow, 13 years from this happening. Hernandez's body was released to his family, and they held a private funeral in his hometown of Bristol. Cheyenne Jenkins remained loyal to him through all of these murder cases, and she took possession of his remains. Hernandez's family agreed to donate his brain to science for study, specifically to the Boston University CTE Center. This was to specifically see if Aaron had CTE, and I want to take some time to talk about this before we wrap up the video talking about Odin. After a thorough exam, Dr. Ann McKee of BU announced in September 2017 that Aaron Hernandez had one of the most severe cases of chronic traumatic encephalopathy, or CTE, that she had ever seen in someone his age. Hernandez's brain showed stage 3 CTE out of 4, with extensive damage to regions that impacted impulse control, judgment, and emotions. This makes a lot of sense. The finding of severe CTE sparked a lot of conversation on how much football-related head trauma could have contributed to his erratic, violent behavior. Hernandez played tackle football from childhood through his early 20s, sustaining many dangerous blows to the head. So at just 27 years old, Hernandez had one of the most extreme cases ever seen in someone under the age of 30. The damage was concentrated in his frontal lobe and hippocampus, and these are areas responsible for personality, impulse control, judgment, emotional regulation, and memory. CTE is linked to repeated concussion and routine subconcussive hits, especially in contact sports like football. As of now, it can only be diagnosed after death by identifying abnormal protein buildup in the brain. And in advanced stages, CTE is associated with aggression, paranoia, depression, poor decision making, and emotional volatility. Doctors emphasize that while CTE does not directly cause violent crimes, it can significantly impair a person's ability to regulate behavior and control impulses. Please know that this doesn't excuse any of his actions, but I do think that it sheds important light on the need for screening, prevention, and reassessments for professional athletes. The NFL can certainly afford to fund this. Hernandez's brain damage closely matched behaviors that he exhibited later on in his life. Many people with CTE never commit violent acts. However, in Hernandez's case, the disease weakened the neurological brakes that most of us have to prevent extreme actions, and this contributes to instability. The CTE diagnosis led to a lot of scrutiny for the NFL and the long-term risks of playing football. Hernandez's case became part of a growing body of evidence linking football to early, severe brain degeneration, and similar findings in other former NFL players reinforced concerns about CTE's behavioral effects. Hernandez's estate sued the NFL alleging negligence in failing to protect or warn him about the risks of brain injury. Aaron's attorneys moved to dismiss his conviction because of all of this, but it didn't end up happening. Shayanna Jenkins also filed lawsuits on behalf of their daughter for loss of parental association, partly targeting the NFL and the Patriots due to the CTE findings. The Patriots had already voided Hernandez's remaining contract back in 2013, and he had no significant assets by the time of his death because everything had been spent on legal fees. And if you're wondering, like I was, the relationship between the two sisters completely deteriorated because of Aaron Hernandez's actions, and Shayanna stood by him through all of it. Now to get back to who we are really here for today. Odin Lloyd has been remembered in ways that reflect who he actually was and not the notoriety of this case. Most of the tributes have come from the people and communities that personally knew him before his name was ever in the headlines. Odin's family has consistently spread love, forgiveness, and dignity, and his mother talks about refusing to let hatred define her son's legacy. She sounds like an incredible mom. Odin's funeral in June of 2013 drew hundreds of mourners from Dorchester, the football community, and more, and guests wore memorial pins with his photo, dates of birth, and death. Many of his teammates and friends spoke about his kindness, humor, and work ethic, and the service focused on who Odin was in life, not the circumstances of his death. Odin's semi-pro football team, the Boston Bandits, also dedicated games and moments of silence to him in the seasons following his death. Teammates wore decals and armbands in his honor, and coaches spoke about how much his loss affected the team. For the Bandits, Odin is remembered as a player who showed up even when he had nothing, sometimes playing in borrowed gear simply because he loved the game. In Dorchester, Odin was a neighborhood kid who always stayed loyal to his roots. While documentaries and books seem to focus on Aaron Hernandez, we know that Odin Lloyd was so much more than his victim. Odin Lloyd had a dream, and he relentlessly pursued it. He may not have had grand monuments or foundations in his name, but his memory lives on through his family, friends, community, and team, and people choose to remember him as a son, brother, teammate, and friend. I'm sending Odin and his family so much love, and I hope that they've found some sense of peace and comfort despite this tragedy. Thank you so much for spending time with me today and listening to Odin's story. I'm sure that many of you here have heard his story before, but I remember watching a documentary years ago, and it just didn't sit right with me that the whole show was about Aaron, and they just touched on Odin here and there. That is never how it's supposed to be. That's why at the beginning of this video, I mentioned that there were a few things that I needed to talk about in regards to Aaron, but I didn't want to spend too much time on his background or any of his accomplishments because the whole world has already done that. Thank you again for your patience with my sick voice in the last couple of videos, by the way. Hopefully this one it was better. Let me know what you thought about today's video, and please take extra good care of yourselves this week. Nurse's orders. Oh, and don't forget our secret handshake in the chat, our butterfly. I'll see you guys next time.